I feel. Thoughts build up until I can't breathe. My mind fills up into a creature, and it haunts me somewhere much deeper. I got nightmares in my head, I fear. The thoughts build up until I can't hear. That my mind fills up into a creature, and it haunts me somewhere much deeper.
Some experts who call to offer help and are refused say the real problem is that the people in charge are old-school cops fighting an old-fashioned turf war.
There were a couple of very difficult customers to deal with who made decisions early about who done it. And because they were inexperienced, neither one of them ever having worked a homicide case, and because they were in charge, basically, it was a rough period of time.
As if that...
So, hi guys, Merry Christmas. Some of you I think are in Christmas. If you're in, I think, Australia, New Zealand, some of you in Europe, it's Christmas here. So Merry Christmas to you guys. If you're having a horrible Christmas, a miserable Christmas, then that's it. Not everyone has a happy Christmas. Timmy is wishing you a good Christmas as well. I did try and find a Christmas hat, but couldn't find one. I wanted Timmy to sort of play Santa. But thank you for joining me. We've got quite an interesting program today. We're going a little bit further in those documentaries. We're going to do a really fascinating look at the photographic narrative. And well, I must say, I look quite bleary-eyed. Sorry about that. And then we're also going to look at the blueprints of the home. And if there's time, we'll go through a little bit of the tabloid narrative as well. What were the tabloids saying at the time? So good to see you. I hope you guys in the States are snug as a bug in a rug, as we say, warm and, keeping warm. And if your feet are cold, that's okay. What do they say? Or your hands, cold hands, warm hearts, right? Anyway, good to see you. What do you think about that clip that I've just played you, where this is 2000 and you hear Alex Hunter? Now, bear in mind, Alex Hunter knows what he did with the indictments. He knows that. Nobody else knows that, or I won't say nobody else, but very few people know what has happened. And he is kind of saying it in a way that basically law enforcement were at tunnel vision, right? And they were totally wrong to be following evidence or leads in a particular direction. And thus also the grand jury were wrong, in his opinion. I mean, the grand jury were presented evidence from both sides, and they came to a decision. And he's unilaterally overruling that. That is totally different from saying we have insufficient evidence, right? And so he's adding fuel to this story that the Boulder police were poorly trained, opinionated, and hard-headed, right? And I think what is an unfortunate legacy to this case is that you tend to always hear the story over and over again about the Boulder police, about Linda Arendt, about, I think it was Officer French who didn't open the door, and he to this day regrets that. I think feels a lot of guilt. I find it quite strange that people don't talk very much about the district attorney and don't talk very much about this lack of transparency about what is really going on less than a year after the grand jury verdict. So I'm going to play that again, and I want you to think about it from the perspective that it's the year 2000. Alex Hunter has received the grand jury indictments for both the Ramsay parents But what is he saying on camera a couple of months later? What is he implying? What is he suggesting? Let's listen to that again. Is the sound okay?
Who call to offer help and are refused say the real problem is that the people in charge are old school cops fighting an old-fashioned turf war.
There were a couple of very difficult customers to deal with who made.
So when he says that, who do you think he's talking about? When Alex Hunter says there were some very tough customers to deal with, he's talking about cops, right? And who do you think he's talking about there? I think it's very likely that he's referring to Detective Steve Thomas, right? And I must say, I don't think of him as a difficult customer. I think about him as someone who is genuinely, sincerely trying to investigate this case. And in many ways, he was on the right track. In many ways, he was doing good police work. And if you ask the question, who ultimately sabotaged this case, who would you say? Detective Steve Thomas. Did he sabotage? Did he prevent the case from being prosecuted? And so I think it's quite interesting that Alex Hunter is kind of blaming the police when what was actually going on was that he turned this investigation into a dead end. He frustrated it more than anybody else, as far as I'm concerned. Unless you say his legal opinion that the case was unprosecutable was valid. What do you think? Do you think it was? We hear 27 years later, still talking about this case, thanks to who? If it had been resolved in 1999, 2000, it could have been resolved. We here 27 years later, thanks primarily to who? Okay, so I'm going to take a little bit further back and just look at this aspect.
No, we were not called to the Ramsay house in the initial stages, no.
Dr. Ring.
Can you render a judgment in the JONBENET case on how the evidence was collected?
I'd rather not go there. I can tell you that the people that were there collecting the evidence did a good job, from our standpoint. But as far as any specifics,
There's no doubt there are mistakes made in the first 24 hours of the investigation. Even Boulder's chief of police at the time, Tom Kobe, admits it.
So what's very interesting is we are now at the year 2000 in the timeline, and the narrative's changed completely. The narrative has changed to basically that the police are the villain in the story, that they didn't know what they were doing, that they made mistakes. In other words, it went from the Ramsays this, the Ramsays that, this was strange, this was bizarre, this was suspicious. Now the spotlight has shifted to law enforcement in just between 1998 and 2000. And it's because of that question mark around the grand jury, I don't want to say verdict, the grand jury decision, because we didn't know what it was. This is suggesting it was all the fault of the police. Was it all the fault of the police? Or was it actually Alex Hunter who made a decision and now is seemingly to put the responsibility for the case going nowhere on the police? Did the police do their job at the end of the day? Did the police do their jobs, or yes or no? In a basic way, did the police investigate the case, bring it to a grand jury, and then there was a result? Did the district attorney do their job, do his job? Simple question. Did the district attorney in the JONBENET Ramsay case do his job? I suppose you could even ask, did he do his job in general in other cases? When there were other cases to prosecute, did he do his job? Simple. Yes or no, did he? Which is prosecute cases, which is someone has done something wrong, broken the law. Do you then investigate it and then take that case to court, try it, and then either convict them or unsuccessfully convict them? Are you doing your job? Was he doing his job?
It is accurate to say that if we had it to do all over again, we would do it differently. It is also accurate to say that we responded well to what we thought we were confronted with.
But the key to where the investigation goes wrong is unquestionably what happens once the kidnapping turns out to be a homicide. And by law, the FBI is no longer in charge. For the first time, Ron Walker explains what happened.
I offered at that point any and all FBI resources that were available to assist the Boulder Police in their investigation. And that offer was declined.
And that is definitely unfortunate. And that was part of the old school aspect that definitely wasn't good or wasn't helpful. And so you kind of you had a situation where, how can I put it? You had ex-FBI in the form of John Douglas giving his expertise very early on. Meanwhile, the chief of police wouldn't allow actual FBI, current FBI, like guys like Ron Walker, to provide assistance in real time. And just that is going to be advantageous to Team Ramsay and, quite frankly, to the district attorney. So that definitely was and kind of an unfortunate thing. But I think you can't get away from the reality that as soon as it goes from, if it's a missing person case, did you guys know this? A missing person case is the purview of the FBI. As soon as it becomes a murder investigation, it's not really part of the jurisdiction of the FBI. Did you guys know that? The FBI search missing person cases. They don't investigate homicides. And so although you could have brought in the FBI in a sense to say, because there is a ransom note, can you explain why this absolutely isn't a kidnapping, even though it's quite obviously not, but can you explain why it's not, and perhaps staging, if that makes sense. And unfortunately, very early on, they did entertain the intruder narrative, and the FBI could possibly have changed that very, very early on and said, this is definitely not a kidnapping. You know, if the FBI had come in earlier and said, okay, where's the point of entry? Oh, there's spider webs here, and documented it, who knows? The case could have turned on that singular point. I must say, I have actually seen footage. I wish I'd made a note of it, like kept the link. But I've seen footage of Lou Smith climbing out the basement, through the basement window, and you see how his hips and shoes scrape against the very edges of that window. And then you've got to ask, how could that spider web have remained there? Let me just talk to you guys. I've just sort of kicked off. Hey, are you snoring? You must stop snoring. Thought Criminal, good to see you here. Always enjoy your comments. Chelsea, good to see you. Jason Truth, Carolyn. Hope you guys are all having a good Christmas. Robbie Robin, good to see you. Bruce T, who's also on Patreon, good to see you. Okay, let's continue.
You know, probably in retrospect, he might now say, gee, I wish I would have had 50 agents come up here and immediately do neighborhood canvases, for example.
It's a gutsy move for the Boulder Police, with its lean track record of 16 homicides in 10 years. Although the Boulder Police called the FBI back into the case the next day, Fatal mistakes are made during those first crucial 24 hours.
Did you catch that? Did you catch that? The Boulder police rejected or said no to FBI help, I think, on that day. But then they called them back the very next day. And so how can you say that they were so horrible? I mean, Ron Walker was pretty involved ultimately in the JONBENET Ramsay case. But yes, there was a little bit of time that was lost. But it's not like the FBI weren't involved whatsoever. Let's play that again.
You know, probably in retrospect, he might now say, gee, I wish I would have had 50 agents come up here and immediately do neighborhood canvases, for example.
It's a gutsy move for the Boulder police, with its lean track record of 16 homicides in 10 years. Although the Boulder police called the FBI back into the case the next day.
Right, so there you have it. So you can't really, you can make a big song and dance that, wow, they said they didn't need the FBI's help. Well, they did the next day. You often hear John Ramsay saying, you know, like in a victim kind of psychology, saying, you know, the Boulder police didn't want the FBI there. Well, the next day they did. So the other thing that I think, if you think in retrospect, what could have been done differently? What was a major error? And it is easy to play Monday morning quarterback, you know, 27 years later. But imagine if they'd brought cadaver dogs into the house, or any dogs. You would think that that would be the obvious way to look for a missing child, right? Is that which way did JONBENET leave the house? Where's JONBENET's scent going? Is it going to the front of the house or the back of the house? And start putting together an idea of the route of the kidnapper, right? By the same token, a dog could also have found JONBENET in the house quite simply and quite easily. And so if you apply the dog narrative that is in the McCann case, right, which was I think a major breakthrough in the McCann case, they could have provided a major breakthrough in the Ramsay case as well. Because one thing that is missing from Mindhunter and all of John Douglas's analysis, certainly chapter 16, I don't think there's anything about dogs. And I think if there's one thing the Ramsays may not have anticipated, it may have been dogs. And interestingly enough, their own dog wasn't home that night either. It's quite interesting. Thanks a lot, Robbie Robin. Merry Christmas. Merry Christmas. So we are going to look at a couple of things like floor plans. We're going to look at what is the other thing? Floor plans. Oh, we're going to look at the photographic narrative. And that's really, for me, one of the most interesting and obvious aspects of this case. So have a look at some of your comments. Thank you for that one. Can you guys hear my dog snoring? It's really a schnauzer. So yeah, absolutely. The Boulder police weren't perfect. I would say they did an adequate to pretty good job. There were some silly mistakes, like trying to think what Steve Thomas, I think he said that they'd forgotten to follow up about the duct tape at the store, but there was kind of a big boo-boo that the Boulder cops made. They were so busy worrying about the things they couldn't do, they forgot some of the things they could have done. One of the things they could have done or should have done was simply take the clothing that Patsy was wearing before they left. Simply gotten that, and in the end, it took a long time to get that clothing. It took a really long time. I want to play just a quick piece of this interview that John and Patsy gave, and then we're going to move back in time to 1998.
and demand a ransom for that person. But that is not something that, in my experience, is very prevalent. In fact, I've never seen that.
The Ramsays say a sexual predator killed their daughter. Why would a sexual predator kidnap a little girl for ransom?
Now, I think what's important to distinguish here is this is the narrative in 2000, and compare the narrative in 2000 to what they said at the press conference in late April 1997. In other words, when it was obviously suggested that one of the Ramsays were the perpetrators, but what I'm saying is when the mere idea was suggested that there was a sexual component to the crime, the Ramsays seemed appalled, insulted, shocked, and seemed to think it was rubbish. And then 3 years later, it's front and center. Now that we are cleared by appearance, by inference, by the suggestion that the grand jury didn't find our behavior suspicious enough to warrant an indictment. Well, now suddenly it's a very strong case that she was a victim of this sort of, this sort of crime. And since then, it's been that all along. It's been that all along.
Ransom.
This is a deranged person. This is not a person that thinks logically or normally.
So I don't know if you caught that. The interview is asking a really good question. He's saying, okay, so what's the motive here, if that's true? Does this guy want money or does he want satisfaction of some sort? And you don't tend to have them mixed up. It's not actually funny. In the Charlotte Cena case, apparently they were mixed up. I'm still not convinced that, I mean, you've still got to find out exactly what kind of thing happened in that case, but apparently they were mixed up. But bear in mind, in the book Mindhunter, in the chapter dealing with Sherry Fay, that actually had to deal with someone who kidnapped someone, so basically a teenager, kidnapped a teenager, and decided to be for sexual purposes, right? That was the motive. And the impression I get, and this is my subjective interpretation of that case, I haven't really studied it in detail, was when the parents publicly begged the perpetrator to release her, I kind of got the feeling that the perpetrator thought, wow, I could actually make some money out of this. In other words, when he abducted her, when he grabbed Sherry Fay, he wasn't thinking about money, he was thinking about satisfaction. But when he realized how important she was and how desperate his family were, I think the thought occurred in his mind, well, I could actually make some money out of this. And if you look at it, he never really intended to return her alive. But that is how it went from an abduction to ransom. And in a way, that kind of makes sense. But it is very insensible for someone to mix them up otherwise, if that makes sense. Okay, let's play a little bit further.
When people say, well, yeah, but that isn't logical. Nothing is logical in this tragedy.
I don't know if I agree with that nothing is logical. I think if you can't come up with a logical, not logical, but a sensible, coherent scenario, then it probably means you don't know the case very well, right? You don't go, I don't know, okay, abductor. You need to look at the evidence. You need to look at the dynamics, right? Hey, you must stop snoring. Okay, is there anything?
In many ways, this was the perfect murder.
Yeah, and so in 2000, it's now perfect murder, and I don't think it was a murder. I don't think someone intended to kill JONBENET. And I think in that sense, so if you take the this idea that you don't get a pedophile who kidnaps for ransom, that they're very seldom mixed up. I think in the other scenario, where it's not an intruder, I don't think it was someone who wanted to do something and then also wanted to kill JONBENET. I think the person wanted to do something else. I don't know if you're following what I'm saying. Okay, so let's look at this. We're going back in time now to 1998, and we're looking now at the Ramsay's behavior, access, and opportunity. And again, I just want to emphasize here, I want you to focus on the difference in tone. In 1998, what's the focus of this ABC documentary compared to 2 years later? And what is the thing that is in between the one and the other? What is on that hinge of time that suddenly changes the tone? Well, the answer is the mysterious grand jury result, which is being suggested by all sorts of people to be favorable to the Ramsays, which it wasn't favorable to the Ramsays. In fact, it was very unfavorable to the Ramsays, but nobody knew that. And so they were in that space. I think there was a lot of mindfuckery going on, and I think one can argue the mindfuckery of the crime scene itself, right? Isn't that in some way repeated in the mindfuckery of the grand jury thing and beyond? And isn't the mindfuckery continuing to this day? And if you don't like the term, if you think it's rude, it's well, it's a nasty thing to be doing to your own society. It's a nasty thing to be doing. And I'm going to be playing a clip from the movie Courage Under Fire. You guys may know what I'm getting at. It's where an officer was asked to compile a report of a fellow soldier, and is kind of encouraged. They want to just give her a medal, and they want him just to lie about what happened, to sanitize it. And then he says something. He says something about, if we can't tell the truth, what kind of people we become. It's in the movie Courage Under Fire. So I'll play that for you guys a little bit later on.
Sources say the June presentation also included an analysis of the Ramsays' behavior, the lack of cooperation with police, and the fact that they hired separate lawyers.
Okay, so Thought Criminal, who I often respect your comments, says, I don't think it was accidental. I think it was intentional. If it's intentional, it's murder. And then I think you've got to be able to say why. Why do you think it was intentional? What was the motive?
Also noted was the point that the Ramsays had both access and opportunity to commit the crime.
So can you see how the tone is totally different here? It's the Ramsays have got access and opportunity, the Ramsays. And then you go 2 years into the future and suddenly it's Boulder Police, the FBI. Law enforcement should have done that. There were some tough cookies that were stubborn, blah, 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 blah. It's a totally different narrative. And it also becomes about this intruder that is illogical, and we don't know how he thinks.
Finally, sources say the last point made in the June presentation was that 4 fibers, consistent with those from Patsy Ramsay's black and red check blazer, were found in a strategic location on the sticky side of the duct tape which John Ramsay pulled from JONBENET's mouth.
So think about that. 4 fibers belonging to Patsy Ramsay are found on the sticky side of the duct tape. And if you think about it, that's a very strategic part of the crime scene. That's not a very easy part for evidence to float into that area. It's not an easy area for contamination, and in a way, you can also think about this scenario where John Ramsay discovers JONBENET. So if he didn't know she was there, then he finds her, and it's surprising, and he didn't know. And Fleet White said he called out. Of course, if John Ramsay knew that JONBENET was there, then he doesn't find her. He knew she was there, but he's pretending to find her. And then you've got to ask about the duct tape being removed and kind of discarded. Was that very intentional, or was John just? I mean, you can also imagine that he would want to find out if she was breathing. That would make sense. But I think when you saw JONBENET, I think you could see quite obviously that she wasn't alive. John describes her as cool to the touch. I would say she was probably cold to the touch. There was a lot of pallor to her skin. There was some mucus on her face and so on. You could see that quite clearly if I showed you some of the crime scene photos, which I'm not going to do, but I've seen them. I don't know if you would. And also there was rigor. JONBENET was kind of stiff. And so I don't think you would feel that you need to perform CPR or that you need really even to move her, because you would know that she's no longer alive. I'm saying if you innocently stepped into that scene and found JONBENET, I think you would realize, okay. And what's also interesting is when Patsy saw JONBENET, she threw herself over JONBENET. And you could say, oh, so that's how Patsy's blazer fibers got onto JONBENET. Unfortunately, with that scenario, the duct tape is at the bottom in the wine cellar, and the fibers couldn't have floated all the way down there and landed on the sticky side. So that is definitely quite a compelling piece of evidence. And I think it's one of the most underestimated pieces of evidence, because you hear constantly about handwriting analysis. You hear constantly about DNA. And if you think about it, the handwriting is being distorted and disguised. So even if you get quite a good test of it, it's still going to be somewhat ambiguous. The DNA is contaminated. And like someone left a comment saying, I don't know why you don't talk about the unknown male DNA found on the underwear. Well, that underwear wasn't actually underwear she was originally wearing. Someone put that underwear on JONBENET size 12. And so, but you want to test basically the underwear that is clean and that is being used as part of, I guess, the cover-up. You want to test that for DNA, if you like. But what I'm trying to say is, isn't the best evidence here not the DNA, not the handwriting of the ransom note? I would say the ransom note itself is very strong evidence, especially no fingerprints on it. But think about it, the fibers on the back side of the sticky side of the duct tape, that's incredible. And not only that, there was also a hair, an animal hair belonging to a beaver, and a lot of fur in fur clothing. What might be gloves, it might be jackets, contains beaver fur.
He left the tape in the basement, an area Patsy Ramsay said she had not been during the time in question. So how strong is this evidence as reportedly presented to the district attorney last June? We asked noted former prosecutor Vincent Bugliosi to serve as our ABC News consultant on the case and to review the information we gathered. Again, we point out there may be other evidence we are not aware of gathered by the detectives or the DA.
The strongest evidence against the Ramsays in this case, as I see it, is nothing that directly implicates them, but the implausibility that anyone else committed these murders.
So did you catch that? He says the strongest evidence against the Ramsays isn't really anything specific. It's the implausibility of the other narrative, right? And John Ramsay's response to that is, well, you know, this guy's so deranged that none of it really does make sense. Well, he's not so deranged that he can't write a 2.5-page ransom note that's quite well expressed. I mean, he uses words like attaché, get some rest, we need the note, we need the money and this sort of thing. I mean, if you're going to say that the killer is so deranged, well, his note is pretty eloquent. You know, use that good Southern common sense of yours. It's a pretty, for all of its sort of convoluted, let's call it fiction, it's nevertheless quite a eloquent ransom note. And I've kind of had the same argument with Vincent van Gogh. People say he was mad. People say that he was unstable. He had mental illness. It doesn't come across in his letters. In his letters, you'd imagine someone who is all of those things would have spelling mistakes, would scratch out words. Their writing would be all over the place. It would be illegible. There would be insensible commentary. There would be a lot of emotion in the writing, you know, like grudges and anger and perhaps swearing and angry writing, you know, pressing hard. Bear in mind, Van Gogh hand wrote his letters, and yet you don't have any of that. In fact, you have incredibly sensible, perceptive handwriting. And so this idea that you can just say, well, because I don't understand that, it was just a deranged individual. No, that's not an answer. I'm not sure if I agree with this idea that there's no evidence that, how can I put it? There's no evidence that implicates the Ramsays, because the grand jury were presented with evidence, right? And the other thing is, so in other words, if you say how much evidence implicates an intruder, right? Then you might say a garrote, duct tape, the stun gun, etc., etc., etc. But for every single one of those arguments, you could say, but the ransom note was written with material inside the house. The ransom note was written with paper and pen from inside the house. The garrote was constructed inside the house. The duct tape is probably one of your best arguments for, well, where did the duct tape come from? But what's on the other side of the duct tape, I think, trumps where did the duct tape come from. And so I think it's quite difficult to, from an evidence basis, say the evidence is much stronger linking an intruder. I don't think one piece of evidence is very strong in the Ramsay case, but put all together, it's quite strong. And isn't that what the grand jury decided? So I don't know if I agree with what he's saying there, but I do agree that the intruder narrative is actually quite nonsensical. It is actually quite nonsensical.
But paradoxically, the strongest evidence that I've just pointed to, by its very nature, is the weakest evidence against the Ramsays.
Why?
Because even if we come to the conclusion that JONBENET was not murdered by an intruder, the inevitable question presents itself. Which one did it? And a prosecutor can't argue to a jury, ladies and gentlemen, the evidence is very clear here that either Mr. or Mrs. Ramsay committed this murder and the other one covered up. Even if the DA could prove.
So that's quite a good argument that he's making. So he's basically saying, if John committed this crime, why on earth would Patsy back him up? If Patsy committed this crime, why on earth would John back him up? And it's absolutely valid. Absolutely valid. But I think he's looking at it in a very specific, targeted way. And what he's not thinking about is another scenario. And he's also using the word murder. This is where an intentional act occurs. Is the other one going to back the other one up? I agree, they probably wouldn't. But I personally don't think that this was an intentional act. And that then changes the scenario into one that I think is a lot more sensible than what he's imagining here. I also think if you don't know this case very well, you can look at the ransom note and just roll your eyes. But when you start digging through the details and really paying attention to the details, such as chapter 16 of Mindhunter, it's pretty incredible how many things seem to match. It's pretty incredible. So I think it's easy to be an expert who looks at this case and you give it an expert view, which makes sense if you don't know very much about the case. And I think a lot of these guys who came in as experts, I mean, you need days, weeks, months, and even longer to totally study this case and know certain aspects contextually in a very thorough way. And these guys simply don't have that time. They've got other clients, other cases, other jobs to do. And so I think it takes someone like a true crime author or someone who only focuses on the Ramsay case day after day, week after week, year after year, to have that kind of intimate knowledge that brings about that sort of level of insight. Does that make sense? And that is, I think, something that has been missing from this case. Okay, I think what we're going to do now is we're going to jump out of this. We can come back to it perhaps later, but I want to talk about the photographic narrative. And we're going to start with this image. Okay, Timmy, I'm going to put you down. Okay. So in the poll, I'll blow that up a little bit. In the poll, I've asked you guys, have you seen that picture before? Have you seen this photograph before? And what do you guys say? That's quite a good point. It's quite a good point. So, do any of you guys have an idea when this photo first emerged and where it came from? In other words, how did this photo become public? And when did it become public? Anyone have any idea on that? Anyone have any idea on that? I just want to have a quick look at the poll. So a quarter of you, please vote if you haven't. A quarter of you say you've seen that photo. And you've got to be sure you've seen it and not confuse it with other similar photos. Let me show you what I mean. I mean, there's this photo, right? There's this photo. Many of us have seen that photo before. And then there's also this one, similar, right? And we've seen this, I guess this is perhaps a better quality picture, right? So I'm not saying, have you seen Burke dressed in those pajamas and JONBENET? Have you seen the setting? I'm saying, have you specifically seen this photo, right? Have you specifically seen this picture before? And 53% of you say no, right? 53% of you say no, more than half of you. And I would assume my community are pretty clued up, more than say many, on if you've read my books, if you know me, then you know that I've written an entire book. Christmas Star is really based all on the last photo of JONBENET. All right. And that's also something that came out kind of recently. Let's see if I can just quickly share that with you guys. So the last photo came out, I think, December 2019. JONBENET Ramsay smiles in haunting final pic. I don't actually think she's smiling, but there it is. And remember I spoke about A&E in the previous live? A&E special, Hunting JONBENET's Killer. And in the last known photo of the little girl, she's seen smiling innocently. I don't think she's smiling here, but this is when this came out. It came out associated with this A&E documentary, which was, once again, Ramsay Apologia, right? So who do you think provided this image to this documentary? The Ramsays, right? And that gives the fact that the Ramsays have got photos of JONBENET and Burke and the house means that they've got the best evidence and the best content, and that gives them a lot of credibility. And so when they tell a story and they're providing this original first-hand content that no one's seen before, it's compelling, it's interesting, and it's because it's kind of original, it kind of trumps what somebody else is saying that wasn't there and that doesn't have this information. But the question is, where does this image come from and when did it enter the media narrative? This one entered the media narrative around about 2019, around about on the, what was it? The 23-year anniversary, I guess, whereas this one entered it at a different time. So what I noticed in this was the hairband, or the, yeah, what can you call it? What would you refer to that as? A hairband, a hair tie, not sure if it's a ribbon, but I basically wrote an entire book basically around this, because when JONBENET was found, she was still wearing this in her hair. And you then say, well, didn't she go to sleep? And if she went to sleep, did she go to sleep with that still in her hair? And if both parents attended to her, both parents were sort of taking her to bed, wouldn't you take that out of her hair? And wouldn't a pageant queen, Patsy Ramsay, take that out of her daughter's hair? Just a simple question, right? In any event, let's deal with this particular image. Jean Carris says, I believe Patsy got a new bike for Christmas. So, yeah, so what's interesting with this image is it actually addresses the bike narrative. This is JONBENET's bike. It's kind of a green kind of bike. There's another bicycle here, which I think is silver, and that was Patsy's bike. And then I think there was a third bicycle as well, which would have been John Ramsay's bike. So the way I understand it, John, Patsy, and JONBENET each got brand new bicycles, but Burke didn't, right? Burke didn't get a brand new bike, but it was Burke's birthday a month later, right? Just Burke's birthday a month later. And I remember in some of my books, including this one, I felt the bike narrative was really important. I was basically saying, from a child's perspective during Christmas time, what might cause feelings of opprobrium? What might cause an argument? What might cause unhappiness? Well, what about if your sibling gets this huge gift, and your mother gets this huge gift, and your father gets this huge gift, and you don't, right? How are you going to feel about that? How would you feel about that? And often with children, they can see the size of the Christmas gifts before they open them, and it gives a sense of the treasure trove that is awaiting them over Christmas. How does it feel when a sibling gets a huge gift, that the size of it is huge, and often size and expense go together, and the value of the gift goes together? And then, well, I'm not getting a really big, what about me? I didn't get a big gift, right? Burke did get some big gifts that year. I think he got a Nintendo 64, which would have been pretty expensive. By the way, the Nintendo 64 is actually mentioned in this boy's life, by the way. So, what were little boys interested in the Christmas of 1996? Well, one of the things that we're interested in was, see if I can find it. I don't know if you remember, there was a Scalextric set, or a, what do they call it? When those cars run on the tracks, there was a box where the wrapping was torn, still in the basement. Now, that could also have been a gift intended for Burke's birthday, and that was quite a big gift as well. So here is a advertisement, or an article on page 25 of this magazine, dealing with Nintendo 64. Right, it's quite a big thing, just dealing with these games. And when a psychologist spoke to Burke and said, "What were you doing?" he would invariably say, "I was playing with this game," and he would even make the sounds, boom, 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 right? And so it was an expensive game, and it was something that he really enjoyed playing with. So here it is, Nintendo 64, $199. It says here, after 2 years of planning, Nintendo's 64-bit game system made its debut in September. With its 4.5 megabytes of memory, more than some home computers, the N64 may be worth the wait. And anyway, there it is. And then on this page, just some more games. And then I think there's something else somewhere in here also talking about, and it's an advertisement or something for the game. I'm trying to see if I can find it. Here it is. Kirby Superstar Nintendo. It's just like a little letter, I guess, sent in. You can't accuse Kirby of being boring. Instead of taking you through just one game, he's ready with 8. Beginners can bounce through the colorful spring breeze. More advanced players can race against the clock in revenge of the Meter Knight. When Kirby eats a menacing foe like a knife-wielding ninja, Kirby can imitate these powers. And you can kind of go into it a bit further in the actual game environment, what is actually taking place in these games that are right. That's kind of a separate narrative. Anyway, let's come back to the photo. Yeah, you see JONBENET on a bike, and you see another bike. You don't see Burke on a bike. Burke, interestingly, during the interview with Dr. Phil in 2016, said, "We both got bikes. We both got bikes." And I'm not sure if that's true. Maybe I missed something. Maybe they're photos we haven't seen yet. But as far as I can see, and as far as I know from what Patsy said, and from what John said, and from the books that we've read, and from the evidence that was gathered, Burke did not get a bicycle. And then the question is, did that bother him? And it's possible that it didn't bother him. Maybe he was enjoying his computer game and it didn't bother him. John Ramsay says the last thing that JonBenet really did on Christmas Day was ride a bicycle. How did Burke feel when JonBenet's got a brand new bike, Patsy's got a brand new bike, John's got a brand new bike? How does Burke feel? Was he just sitting in his room playing with a computer game and he was happy anyway? Maybe. Another thing that's potentially quite interesting here is if there were 3 bikes and the third bike wasn't John's bike, but there was nevertheless another bike in the Ramsay home, or even if it was Burke's bike, but that bike then disappeared from the crime scene, then how did that happen? Right? In other words, could someone have left the Ramsay home in the middle of the night on a bicycle? ... Right. Okay, so let's deal with let's deal with this photo. Where does it come from, and when did it enter the media narrative? Now, I can tell you, I started writing books on the Ramsay case in 2016, and I didn't really stop until I don't know, 2018. But I ended up writing over a dozen books, around about a dozen books on the Ramsay case. And so if anyone was aware of all the photos that had ever been taken, or let's say almost all of them, I'm sure there's a couple that I haven't gotten around to yet. It was me, right? I was looking for every single photo I could find of, related to this case. And I can tell you now, this photo wasn't one of them. So it wasn't around in 2016, meaning from 1996 to 2016, for 20 years, this photo wasn't in the media narrative. Neither was this one, right? This one came up for the first time in 2019. This, and in the context of a documentary that is supporting the Ramsays. This one came up for the first time on this website, right? Feature-length documentary selected to premiere with the 2021 launch of streamer Discovery Plus. Can you guys see that? So this image is on Kim Duke's director, writer, producer page that is to promote this documentary, JonBenet Ramsay, What Really Happened. 24 years after JonBenet's death, her family still has questions. So guess what? It's another Ramsay apologia. And so I guess the Ramsays provided this director with this image to promote the documentary, right? And then for the first time, basically in 2021, this picture emerges in the photographic narrative of the story. Seems a little bit late, doesn't it? I mean, there were pro-Ramsay documentaries as early as the year 2000. Why not provide these images then, right? And here you have a little quote: "The journey to find the truth unfolds through the narration of Lou Smith. Smith's voice is heard in previously unreleased audio tapes, blah, blah, blah." So here you can see this is going to be absolutely pro-Ramsay, this film, this documentary. And so it's pro-Ramsay, and to make it even more interesting, let's provide a photo that nobody has ever seen before. And so it makes for very original content in quite an old story. But the other thing that I think is worth looking at is what do you see in this photo that would potentially have been helpful 10 or 20 years ago? Well, JonBenet on a bicycle and Burke not on a bicycle. In other words, the bicycle narrative, right? Okay, let's have a look at some of your comments. Someone says, were they the blue PJs in JONBENET's bathroom? I don't know. Like, to me, they look kind of dark. They look kind of a dark color. I don't know if you turn them inside out, if they'd be kind of light blue and fleecy. I don't know. One would have to check that. I don't know how hard it would be to source the kind of commercial pajamas he's wearing there and then turn them inside out and have a look. But it certainly isn't. They are blue. They just seem to be a darker blue than what you see there. But we do know those were inside out. I think Kola or somebody said that those pajama pants would have been too big for JONBENET, which I think already tells you something. I don't think they are one piece. No. Bria, good to see you. Merry Christmas. Okay. So the photographic narrative is really interesting. And the part that I really want to share with you guys is just think about this in a very basic way. Patsy Ramsay is someone who's used to cameras and photographs. She was a pageant queen herself. She was the model in a heck of a lot of photographs, right? Then Patsy has her own child participate in pageants, and she hires not just one, but several photographers to do shoots with JONBENET. And that alone is in a way the reason why the Ramsay case exploded, was because there was so much photos of this little girl. That's the one thing. So many photos, so much video as well. And then at the same time, Patsy had put JONBENET into outfits, done her hair, put makeup on her, put crowns on her. And in some photos, JONBENET looks like a beautiful little American princess. It looks like she kind of looks like American royalty, like an American princess, especially those black and white photos of her. And you think, wow, what a beautiful little girl that seems to be living a fairy tale. And then this horrible thing happened to her. How did it possibly happen? And then you see other photos of her where she seems to have lipstick on, and she's not unattractive, but it's starting to become a little over the top, let's put it that way. And then you see JONBENET in these very extravagant outfits and all of that. And then you see that what is going on in Boulder, Colorado, and Boulder, Colorado is not the sort of place where you have child beauty pageants. It's just not that kind of community. They're very down to earth, and that's kind of a southern thing. And Patsy brought her kids into this community, and nevertheless, but the point is that there was a heck of a lot of photography going on. And it wasn't only photography from the point of view of photographers. There was even Judith Phillips, who documented Patsy's cancer. And there were people who would come in and record Patsy doing the historical homes tour. Hi, I'm Patsy Ramsay. This is JONBENET. This is Berg. Blah, blah, blah. You guys all know about that, right? So you have this fabric of photography, this fabric of beauty queens and child pageants and outfits and photos and video, right? That's that. But then you also have the family photography. And I found what was so bizarre when I was researching the Ramsay case. One of the things I wanted to look at is how did the Ramsays, how was the Christmas of 1996 in the Ramsay home different to the Christmas of 1995 and the Christmas of 1994? And the Christmas of 1993, and as far back as you could go. And so you look at the photos and video. There's photos and video of JONBENET and Berg and some other members of the family celebrating Christmas. There's, as I say, photos and video, and then another year. Photos and video, another year, photos. And then when you get to 1996, there's like one photo of JONBENET, like in a Christmas setting, like this sort of thing. That was kind of the photo that we all saw, and then that was really it. There was maybe another photo of JONBENET with Patsy, but that's it. I mean, we didn't see that picture, and we didn't see this picture, but we did see those other pictures. And so you kind of wonder why in the Christmas of 1995 and whatever, you've got all of this footage, and suddenly in the Christmas of 1996, when they had more parties than ever, you had the Christmas party on December 23rd, you had Patsy's 40th birthday party, Access Graphics party, and so on, all of these things happening. And then you just don't see any photos of JONBENET. What about JONBENET's birthday party? Where are those photos? And one of the important things with that is you'd be able to see other people. You'd see other children. You'd see what the house often looked like. You perhaps see the housekeeper. And yet that narrative has kind of been kept from us. The bottom line is, what is really interesting, that in the same way that the Ramsay ransom note doesn't have any fingerprints on it, is that the Christmas of 1996 doesn't have any photos of it, virtually none. And this was a family that took a heck of a lot of photos. They had cameras. John's camera was actually very close to the ransom note. John's camera was lying on a table in the same hallway as the ransom note. I think there was even a video camera on the kitchen table as well, right? Those also items that could have been and perhaps should have been seized, right? And I'm just saying, if you think about the Ramsay Christmas of 1996, where are all the photos? We've not been shown them. Why? Why not? I mean, if everything was so wonderful, and in the Ramsay's book, that's exactly how they describe it, as this perfect Christmas, then why wait 21 years or 23 years to share a photo like this one? And so the photo narrative is also very interesting. And eventually that takes you into areas like the Ramsay home, and you say, yeah, I think I know the Ramsay home quite well. What about the bedroom of the parents? How well do you know that room? And in this respect, somebody sent me, see if I can find it. So I want to share this image. So that is the third floor, right? John and Patsy's bedroom. There are the stairs going down to Burke's bedroom. Burke's bedroom is basically immediately below. The bed in the Ramsay bedroom, do you agree, is around about here? In this little alcove would be a bedside table where some books were on that bedside table. In this little alcove here would be another bedside table with books on it. And then there's quite a lot going on here. There is the dressing and study here. There's a bathroom here, and so on. It's a pretty big space for a bedroom, and it's an area for John and Patsy to be private. I don't know where the bookcase was. I presume it may have been in the lounge on the first floor downstairs. But this is their bedroom. And so I've got a kind of an interesting question. In terms of this floor plan, where is this? Where is this? That is on the third floor. That's on the third floor. Where is that? So you can see there's a desk over here and a lamp. And this is on the 3rd floor. Where is that? If that is on the 3rd floor, where is it? What happened to that image? And I've got an idea it is over here. It's in this area. You can see what looks like windows, and then there's a slight curve in the wall, and then there's another window. Well, if you look at this, there's a window and then a slight curve and another window, right? So let's bring that up again. Do you agree that this study that you saw there's likely, well, there it says dressing and study, but there's another room in this house over here. What is that? What is this room over here? You might say it's a restroom, but the restroom and the bathroom, all of that is over here. So you've got a study with windows over here. You've got the bedroom over here, and then you've got this little box over here. What is that? Do you see what I'm getting at? Someone says it's a closet. Someone says walk-in closet. Okay. But one thing that you can see is that this particular area doesn't seem to have any windows, right? There's a window here, there are windows over there, there's windows there. There's, I guess, a window over there as well. There's no window here. And some people thought that they saw Mindhunter lying, some say Patsy's side, some say John's side. And so my question is, if Mindhunter was used and someone was using like a flashlight, but they didn't want to be seen, it could have been Gary Oliver. Gary Oliver may have come up the stairs. Is anyone home? You know, I need some tools. I need something to write with. Maybe he found Mindhunter. Maybe he found Mindhunter. Maybe his prints are on Mindhunter. And if he needed some time to do whatever he was doing, a place where you wouldn't be seen, well, one is the basement, but another one is potentially in this little box here. I don't know if there would be a desk in here. I don't know if there would be a chair in here, but one thing I do know is there's no windows here. Another place you could potentially sit and people from the outside wouldn't see you is perhaps on the staircase. Because to me, that is an interesting question. Where did the ransom writer write the ransom note? Equally, if the ransom note writer used Mindhunter, where did this person read it and study it and take notes from it? Where was that taking place? Basement, kitchen, bedroom, where? Someone says, I think it's storage, safe room or a hidden room. But this is, do you agree? This is a room that we don't know too much about. It's definitely a room we don't know a terrible amount about. By the way, the photo, the picture you see behind me with the star is a photo that I took in Boulder in November. I'm going to be showing you more footage of that in the next live stream. Okay, I want to share just a couple more photos if I can find them. So this was sent to me by from Gene Karras. This is, I think, Boulder right now. Can I make this bigger? This is Boulder right now. It was sent 4 hours ago, and this is Boulder right now on Christmas Eve. And what do you see? And Jean was actually saying, Jean's in Boulder right now, she was saying that it snows and then the walkways, the snow disappears off the walkways. And I said to her, can you try and take some photos of the walkways very early? Is there a layer of frost on that? And so we'll see if that tells us anything. But this is Boulder right now. Remember Patsy was saying, well, there was no snow. Well, there tends to be snow at this time of the year in Boulder, right? I'm just making an obvious point. Okay, I see we had 1 hour 16. I don't really want to go too much over an hour and 30. I want to let, if you guys are with your families, you can go back to your families and get in touch with the people you need to get in touch with. So I'm going to play a little bit more from those documentaries. Let's just have a look at the comments here. I think there's another Instagram I want to play that is from Cotton Star, and Cotton Star might be joining us tomorrow. And this is a clip. I'll put a link in chat. You should really follow Cotton Star if you aren't already. Is it this one? You should follow Cotton Star if you haven't already. And this is a link to what I'm about to put up. It's to do with the bicycles, right? So there you got quite a good view of Patsy's bicycle, which was a silver bike. Okay. So something that I always kind of felt strongly about in terms of this case was the bicycle narrative and Boulder. Long before I covered the JONBENET Ramsay case, I was aware of Boulder because I did triathlon and cycling, and a lot of the most famous cyclists in the world would go and train in Boulder. And so I was aware of Boulder as a cycling community. And so when I went to Boulder myself, I've been there a couple of times. I think I went in May, and then I went again in November. Anyway, when I went in May, the first thing that happened when I got off the bus, so I caught a bus from the airport to Boulder, I was standing waiting to catch an Uber, and people were passing me on bicycles. And then when I went to my hotel, you would need to you see Uber is passing folks on bicycles, the bicycle paths everywhere, and you then go to your hotel, and then again, bicycles passing you in the parking lot, and you kind of get a sense, I want to get a bicycle. Oh, this is what people in Boulder do. You can train hardcore training and go go into the mountains and do that kind of training, or you can cycle on the suburban bicycle paths. But you sort of feel this is a Boulder-ish thing to do. And you can imagine if you live in Boulder and you're a kid in Boulder, then all the kids have got bicycles, then you also want one. So it wouldn't just be a case that Merry Christmas, JONBENET got a bicycle. Merry Christmas, Patsy got a bicycle. Merry Christmas, John got a bicycle. It's not just, okay, they got bicycles, no big deal. This is in a bicycle community where right outside your house is a bicycle path, where bicycles are part of the fabric of your neighborhood every single day. And that then makes it a totally different kettle of fish if everyone is getting a bicycle except you. And I don't think you can say that a 9-year-old boy isn't going to care about a bicycle. I mean, they're advertising bicycles to 9-year-old boys or little boys in magazines like this over Christmas, right? And if you look at the back of this, magazine, look what you see here. Bicycle, looks like basketball, bow and arrow set, some kind of computer game, camping. And I would challenge you to say how many things that you see here was Burke not interested in? But one of them would definitely be a bicycle. Bear in mind, this is 1996. It's not now when kids are more interested in the internet and their phone than in bicycles, right? It's not Christmas till someone cries. That's such a good point. Okay. Yeah, totally. Okay, so I'm gonna play a little bit more from those documentaries, and then I'm gonna sign off. Okay, here we go.
You get one cop throwing his badge down because he doesn't think you're being tough enough on the Ramsays, and you have another detective throwing his badge down because he thinks you're too tough.
I don't think it was personal. I think it was just that they decided that the parents had done it, and then the longer they stayed on that course, the harder it was for them to back up and say, gee, maybe we should look somewhere else.
Ironically, they have all contributed in some way to what went wrong in the investigation. When we looked at the Ramsay case, we found a series of conflicts and missteps that still have not been resolved. It all started with the police.
So again, this is the 2000 documentary, and can you see the tone is the Ramsays basically saying how the police made a mistake. And that's, again, after the grand jury mystery, right? I'm just saying, can you see how clearly the tone changes in the sort of reporting of this? So I'm going to stop there in terms of this documentary, and we'll continue a little bit further with this one.
Irresistible mosaic of guilt. The prosecutor's argument and logic has got to be so powerful that the jury feels it has no choice but to convict.
On Friday, we spoke to lawyers for John and Patsy Ramsay, and they told us that they believe the Ramsays are the innocent victims of a, quote, unprecedented and vicious media assault, attempting to influence the grand jury. They also believe police have stirred up, in their words, a lynch mob. The lawyers say it's difficult to address specifics without seeing the actual police reports, and they added that they have not heard the 911 enhancement.
Furthermore, the lawyers also challenged the credibility of Donald Foster, who analyzed the text of the ransom note. And they told us they believe it's easier to hear a scream in the basement from across the street than from the Ramsays' third-floor master bedroom.
The murder of JONBENET Ramsay consumed his life. So why did this detective suddenly up and quit the case and his job? He'll tell you tonight in an Elizabeth Vargas exclusive when 2020 Sunday continues.
So this was in a way one of the biggest scoops, or one of the biggest interviews at this time in 1998. It was the first time Detective Steve Thomas was going to talk to the media, right? And he had a lot to say, and he was upset. And the only reason he could talk to the media was at this point he'd given it, he handed in his badge. He'd just quit the investigation, and that was when the grand jury thing basically started. At the moment Steve Thomas kind of stepped out the door, the grand jury thing kind of became a thing, right? So let's is this an ad? Yeah, let's just get through these ads here.
Detectives in the Ramsay investigation, and then suddenly last month,
Is the sound
he quit,
okay?
igniting a firestorm of controversy. Tonight, for the first time, he speaks out. And while his ground rule was that he wouldn't discuss the evidence, he does tell Elizabeth Vargas and the rest of us why he thinks this murder remains unsolved.
This case took over your life.
Well, it absolutely did. It became all-consuming night.
So what we want to hear, so what he's going to say here is he's not going to say, I think X killed JONBENET, but he's going to say why. This is in 1998. He's going to say why in 1998 the case was, I want to use a swear word, the case was doomed, right? And I think it's really interesting what he said in 1998, what we know happened in 1999, and where we are 27 years later. I think it's quite interesting. It's here.
Night and day, the birthdays and holidays and Christmas and anniversaries that we spent away from home.
Detective Steve Thomas is a dedicated cop with a solid record for 13 years. For nearly 2 years, he says he and other detectives worked 100-hour weeks, all in the name of justice for a murdered 6-year-old.
That's some of the...
Okay, before we continue that, can you identify the cop that is walking slightly in front of him and that gets into the vehicle? Can you tell who that is? Let's go back slightly.
100-hour weeks,
That
all
guy.
in the name of
Can you
justice
tell who
for
that
a
is?
murdered
Let's
6-year-old.
watch him one more time.
Years. For nearly 2 years, he says he and other detectives worked 100-hour weeks, all
Do you
in
know
the
who
name
this
of justice
policeman
for a
is?
murdered 6-year-old.
That's some of the sentiment behind where the detectives stand and what they feel about JONBENET.
And yet on August 6th, you resigned from your job.
A career that I loved, a career that I think I was pretty good at.
But on that painful day he resigned, on JONBENET's birthday, Detective Thomas sent flowers to her grave, turned in his badge, and wrote a scathing letter.
In your letter, you made a very serious allegation accusing the district attorney, Alex Hunter, of thoroughly compromising the Ramsay investigation.
So there you have it. In 1998, before the grand jury result and announcement, arguably a year before, what was he saying? What was Steve Thomas saying? That one person above all was, in his view, hurting this case, hurting the investigation, right? And he didn't just say it in an interview, he wrote a letter. He made it kind of official. I think the cop you saw in that footage is, I'm going to butcher his name, but isn't it Trujillo? And we've actually got someone with that surname in chat. Any relation, possibly?
I stand by my letter.
That Letter, a 5-page, single-spaced hand grenade thrown right into a case that seemed to have stalled for months. In it, Thomas accused the Boulder District Attorney's Office of mishandling and compromising the case.
So can you see what he says there? I believe the district attorney's office is thoroughly compromised. This is from a detective investigating the Ramsay case while it's live in real time, unfolding, and then he quits in disgust, right? And then a year later, you have the grand jury pageant, because that's essentially what it was. We're having a grand jury trial. We're doing what we're supposed to do, only to put the whole thing in a drawer and forget about it, and pretend that that nothing had actually happened, that the grand jury hadn't actually come to a decision, right? And so, are his words? Is he telling the truth here, or is he compromised? Was he on the right track, and was he actually a good cop, and was he doing his job? Right, that's the one question. Or was the district attorney not a good district attorney in terms of this case?
He accused them of shameless tactics against innocent people.
So what Detective Steve Thomas is saying here is, why the hell are you not clearing, let's say, the Whites, let's say Santa, right, Bill McReynolds? Why are you not clearing Linda Hoffman Pugh, or perhaps her husband, people who obviously didn't commit this crime? Why are they being sort of allowed to remain unofficial suspects, but especially, I guess, Fleet White?
Failing to support basic search warrants for telephone and credit card records.
And I must say, I think that is almost one of the most serious interferences in the Ramsay case, which is, think about true crime today, right? Think about, let's just do it like that. Think about modern true crime. Have you ever heard in your life about a case where it's, let's say, Rex Heuermann, or it is Brian Koberger, or it is Laurie Vallow, where you say, we are not going to look at their telephone records. We're not going to look at their credit cards. I was just sitting in court with and obviously followed the prosecution of Caitlin Armstrong. And just that on its own, the telephone records, the telephone records is incredibly damning. The same in the Laurie Vallow case. Just that on its own, the telephone records is incredibly damning. And so here you have a case where the district attorney basically says, we're not going to allow you to look at their telephone records. We're not going to allow you to look at the credit card records, in other words, the financial statements. And I believe one of the biggest, most underestimated aspects to the Ramsay case is the financial narrative. If you think about the ransom note, the very first words in the ransom note is, we respect your business. And John's business was on fire in 1996. Do you think that John's business is regarded as the key reason the crime happened from an intruder perspective? Is it not a key reason why the crime could have happened from the other perspective? In many ways, was John Ramsay really busy in terms of his work that he didn't realize what was going on at home? Right? And maybe a little boy felt, I don't know whether my dad loves me if I'm not getting a bicycle and everyone else is getting one, right? I don't see my dad enough to sort of feel like if you know what I'm getting at, right? But that's the family dynamics aspect. What about the finance aspect? What about if, let's say, the Ramsays had called, right? The Ramsays had phoned law enforcement and said, our child has died, think it's an accident. And then you had the police come in and they did an autopsy and they found evidence of whatever. And what do you think would have happened in the aftermath, right? Well, John Ramsay was working at Access Graphics, and Access Graphics needed to be sold it was sold the following year to General Electric for, I think, $2.8 billion. What do you think would have happened if it was a situation of this happened in the Ramsay family and John Ramsay is the CEO of this company, compared to, no, John Ramsay had nothing to do with this, but anyway, let's deal with let's continue business as usual. It's just quite a interesting, if you talk about the intruder narrative, this is quite an interesting narrative that you never hear about, the financial narrative. And then you see things like this. Credit card records, warrants for that not provided. Did the Ramsays buy the duct tape? Did they buy string, nylon cord? Did they buy bicycles? How many bicycles did they buy? All that kind of thing. Who were they calling? Et cetera, et cetera, et cetera.
Records, and of sharing police evidence with the Ramsays and their lawyers.
And I think that's also one of the most serious betrayals, is giving sensitive investigative information from the prosecution side to the defense. Hi, we are investigating the Ramsays. Oh, are you their lawyers? This is what we have. And we, by the way, we actually haven't spoken to them yet, but this is the information we have. And now can you imagine in the Chris Watts case? Can you imagine in the Chris Watts case, if before he even walked into that interrogation cubicle, a lawyer had gone up to him and said, listen, we've gotten this from Agent Coda. They know that you're having an affair. They believe that Shanann and the kids you didn't leave them alone in the house. That's what they've got on you. Anyway, do you want to go into the cubicle and chat to them? And what would he have said? He would have said two things. Number one, I'm not going to talk to you right now. Number two, I want a lawyer. And then you say, why on earth did you give Chris Watts this information? He could have been successfully prosecuted because law enforcement had an advantage over him. He thought nobody knew about the affair, but guess what? Nicole Kessinger has informed them, and it's true. And so we can tell whether he's lying, and we can do it that way, right? So can you see how you can totally sabotage a case by doing this sort of thing, by sharing sensitive information that's possibly inculpatory? And now you give the opposing side a chance to come up with explanations and excuses and ways to address difficult questions. In other words, they're going to ask you about this, they're going to ask you about that. You're getting legal advice on how to deal with these difficult questions regarding evidence. It looks like they found a book, Mindhunter, in your home. And guess what the legal advice would be? They don't have it on an evidence list, so I don't know if they can prove it. So have them prove that the book was there. So if you say, I don't remember, they don't actually have the book in custody, right? That could be a legal, something that a lawyer tells you to do in response to that, right? Whereas if you didn't have the legal advice and the cop actually produced a photo of that book in front of you and said, how do you explain this? Then how would you explain it?
It just got to a point where it was very disheartening.
Also in Thomas's letter, the serious accusation that some evidence was never collected, some never tested, because of the office of Boulder's district attorney, Alex Hunter.
So the tone of Alex Hunter in 2000, and I played some of that, where he talks about stubborn cops and this and that. It's totally different to the tone right here. Let's play that again. In other words, how Alex Hunter is dealing with the evidence.
In it, Thomas accused the Boulder District Attorney's Office of mishandling and compromising the case. He accused them of shameless tactics against innocent people, of failing to support basic search warrants for telephone and credit card records, and of sharing police evidence with the Ramsays and their lawyers.
It just got to a point where it was very disheartening.
Also in Thomas's letter, the serious accusation that some evidence was never collected, some never tested, because of the office of Boulder's district attorney, Alex Hunter.
So today, you have the narrative that Boulder PD are so stupid, inept, that they're the small department that doesn't know what they're doing. They didn't even test that evidence. Why didn't they test the evidence? They didn't even test that. And I think somewhere along the line, the Ramsay said something like, can you believe it? The Boulder PD took a year just to ask for our clothing. What a stupid department. Well, who do you think was interfering with that process of evidence gathering? You know, the district attorney is supposed to prosecute suspects, right? That's kind of the job of a district attorney. He's supposed to build a case. He's on the side of someone has committed a crime, build a case against them, gather evidence against them. If there's reasonable, if it's reasonable to prosecute, if there's probable cause, then you make a case. It's not to help the defense, right? The Ramsays have got their own defense attorney. The district attorney is not there to provide a defense. That's not his job. He's there to prosecute cases. You've got public defenders who are there to defend. The Ramsays had more than enough. That some of the best lawyers in the entire state of Colorado, arguably in America as a whole. So why is Alex Hunter providing them with support? They've got John Douglas. Why does he need to support them?
If I come across as arrogant, I apologize to you for that.
Citing the sensitivities surrounding the grand jury, Hunter declined our request for an interview.
Some people.
So you see how weird this is. In 1998, prior to the grand jury thing, Hunter's got nothing to say. I'm not going to be interviewed. And you hear him saying there on camera, if I seem arrogant, I apologize. Do you think it's arrogant to have a grand jury trial and then go on in front of the cameras, go to the media and say, we don't have sufficient evidence to indict when the grand jury voted to indict in 4 cases, 2 indictments for John and 2 indictments for Patsy, not 1 indictment for Patsy, 4, right? Do you think it's arrogant after so much time, money, effort, and work, including from this officer here, to overrule all of that and say, we're just not going to take it any further? And I'm not going to say why. I'm also not going to let you know what the grand jury voted because it's secret, and that suits me really, really well. We're not going to do that. And I just think it's so ironic that he says, if I seem arrogant, what ultimately happened with the grand jury is pretty arrogant in terms of this idea that you're supposed to be a champion for justice, right? And I think the most famous case in America that is the poster child for injustice is this case.
Sensitivities surrounding the grand jury, Hunter declined our request for an interview.
Some people.
Alex Hunter.
If I come across as arrogant, I apologize to you for that.
Citing the sensitivities surrounding the grand jury, Hunter declined our request for an interview.
Some people might.
Like I know Alex Hunter's statements off by heart. You know, the list of suspects narrows. Soon there will be no one on the list, and then he looks into the camera, but you. And wasn't that all posturing and pageantry that was absolutely meaningless? It made you think that things were being done, but were they being done? What is the other thing he said? The grand jury have completed their work and will not return. There's insufficient evidence, blah, blah, blah. Remember that. And he, in that same thing, he talks about, you know, it is secret. It is secret. And so it was secret for how many years?
Might say, well, you are the police. It doesn't matter what support or lack thereof you're getting from the DA's office. Just go out and get the evidence and tell us who the killer is. Why can't you do that?
Maybe on television, but police detectives know that is not the case in real life.
Do the police know who killed JonBenet Ramsay?
I'm not going to answer that question.
He says he is loyal to his victim above all else. And since his resignation, many have called him a hero who forced a reluctant prosecutor to convene a grand jury. Some call him a traitor.
There have been some critics who maintain that your letter may actually hurt a prosecution's case in the future.
So what do you think? Do you think Steve Thomas's letter hurt the case? Do you think Steve Thomas hurt this case, or do you think somebody else hurt this case in retrospect?
That in fact it may be used in a trial to help a defendant get off.
I hate to think that the truth would hurt anything.
You called this case a failure of the system. Those are very harsh words.
We're coming up on the second anniversary of this homicide. I certainly don't see a success or a victory of justice.
Did JonBenet get to you more than other cases?
Absolutely. Someone needs to stand up and speak for JonBenet. She can't speak for herself, and the detectives tried to do that.
We're going to solve this case, but we're going to do it our way.
As Boulder's district attorney for 26 years, running the last 7 terms unopposed, Alex Hunter is certainly popular. Yet the Steve Thomas letter ignited a firestorm of criticism.
We asked him to remove the case from Alex Hunter's jurisdiction.
Yeah, you even have Fleet White saying in 1998, can we please get this guy off the case?
Some key Ramsay case witnesses joined Thomas in a call for a special prosecutor, like Fleet White and his wife Priscilla, who had dinner with the Ramsays that Christmas Day.
It is likely that the district attorney has attempted to discourage police detectives.
Last month, a front-page column called Alex Hunter the reluctant prosecutor. Veteran reporter Juliet Whitman outlined a sampling of cases not filed or undercharged.
I think there's real fear and incompetence and laziness.
Attorney Claudia Bailiff ran Boulder's Rape Crisis Center for 5 years. She says she was so surprised at the plea bargains for child molesters. In 1990, she prepared this formal study of Hunter's record.
So this is a formal study of Hunter's record. Look at this. 16 of the 78 cases were dismissed, 21%. 2 perpetrators received deferred prosecutions. 3 went to trial, 2 were found not guilty by the jury. Of the 13 perpetrators sentenced to county jail, 6 of them were granted work release. Perpetrators guilty of that, and then he just provides the sentences.
The most staggering statistic we came up with was of 60 individuals who were convicted of sexually abusing children or incest, only 1 went to prison. And we were absolutely stunned by that.
How's that? 60 cases like that, 1 went to prison. 1 out of 60 is something like, I don't know, is it 2%? So it is staggering. It's disgusting.
Bailiff resigned in frustration. The new team at the Rape Crisis Center says Hunter's record has improved. But what about the thorny case of Sid Wells, murdered?
Okay, so I'm going to stop there. And I just want to end off with a little clip from the movie Courage Under Fire. Now, Courage Under Fire is about someone who empowers an officer to find out what happened in a military setting. And then no one wants to really talk about it because some of the things that happened were embarrassing, shameful, whatever. And including some of the things that he did. You know, he fired on some of his own men by mistake. And the military want to shut all of that down. They just want to give her a medal posthumously. And they want him to just provide a document that basically sanitizes the whole story and just says she behaved in a courageous way, but not tell the human story, not acknowledge the weakness in it, and not tell the true story. And he refuses to do that. And ultimately, he tells the real story, and this is what he says when he does that. See if I can put it up. Okay, I need to do that. So this is a clip from Courage Under Fire. Let me turn the volume up. Listen to the words of what he says here.
I think in order to honor a soldier like Karen Walden, we have to tell the truth, General, about what happened over there. The whole hard, cold truth. And until we do that, we dishonor her.
And I think that is the story of the JonBenet Ramsay case. Until we can tell the truth about what happened in this story, then we dishonor that little girl, but it also brings dishonor into all these other areas. Suddenly, the Boulder police are dishonorable. Suddenly, we've got to criticize the district attorney. We've got to ask why family photos are being selectively withheld and then provided to apologists later on. And it's in a real sense, the Ramsay case is the story about the Christmas fairy tale and the perfect family, the family that have got the white picket fence, the family that have got a patriarch that is charming, intelligent, a warm, loving dad, a successful businessman, right? In other words, the good father. That's the symbol that you see with John Ramsay, or certainly the symbol that you want to see, or certainly the symbol that he presents. Then you've got Patsy, the beautiful partner and mother that creates a beautiful home for her family, that goes to so much effort to create the perfect Christmas at Christmas time, Christmas trees in every room. And part of that extravagance, part of that excess is part of the fairy tale of a successful American family. This is where American families go to heaven. It is the epitome of a happy family. You've got a little boy who is living his best life. He's a scout. He has everything that he wants. He's to some extent a spoiled child, but he's also a very happy child. He plays baseball. He has all these hobbies, and he has fun. There's a little girl in that house who plays with her brother, and they have fun as well, and does other things that she enjoys, and so on and so on. She rides her bicycle and plays dress up and plays with dolls and does all of that kind of thing. And then all four of these individuals come together at Christmas time. And instead of it being a time where the Christmas lights are flickering and there's this warm and fuzzy scenario of good tidings and peace to mankind, something horrible happens. And what makes this horrible thing that happens 1,000 times worse is this idea that this person you thought was a good father, this woman who you thought was a good mother, this little boy who you thought was a good brother, this little girl who you thought was a happy child, it turns out that beneath the surface of that, a lot of other things are going on. Patsy Ramsay had cancer. In terms of the sibling relationship between Burke and JonBenet, at one point Burke hit JonBenet in the face with a golf club. Maybe it was by mistake, but nevertheless, that's the not very happy side of the story. As I said, Patsy had cancer. JonBenet got, I think she went to the doctor 30 times in her short life, and she was struggling with insomnia, bad breath, all sorts of infections. She wasn't a particularly healthy kid, right? Kind of under the circumstances. Somebody said that she was in tears at that Christmas party on the 23rd. She was crying. The last photo you see of JonBenet Ramsay is almost the most shocking, where you see this. Where is it? Where's the last photo? The last photo, when you see of JonBenet, she looks almost unrecognizable. She doesn't look as pretty as we've seen her before. She doesn't seem to be smiling. Is she very happy in this picture? And so, in other words, what we want to believe when we see the Ramsays, we want to believe that this is possible, that you can have this fairy tale over Christmas. And instead it becomes this horrible inversion where instead of gifts and the fruits of Christmas and the fruits of a happy family, you have, instead of these, what you would typically expect under a Christmas tree, you actually have a dead child under a Christmas tree. What could be more horrifying and horrible than that? And as I say, as bad as all of that is, the thing that is, for me, aggravates this and makes it totally unacceptable is 27 years later, the circus continues. The same thing happening in the Madeleine McCann case. The circus continues. It feels like people lying to each other. That's what it feels like. It doesn't feel like warm and fuzzy Christmas and we're a community that loves itself, that serves itself, that takes care of itself. It feels like a community that is kind of at war with itself, and there's special interest in that community where certain people get what they want and who gives a crap about other communities. And that is what's so worrying about this. Lisa Breck, thank you so much. Very kind. Thank you, Lisa. Do you follow what I'm saying? If we are a society that can't tell the truth about itself, then that is extremely worrying. And if that society was where it was in 1996. Where is it going to be in 2023? Well, we know. America's split down the middle. Where's the society going to be in 2024, 2025? If we don't sort this shit out, where are we going to be as a society? And I think the thing that I can't help thinking about, I was with my family a couple of hours ago. We had lunch together, and you think about your own father you want to trust. Your own father, you want him to be someone reliable and truthful and a good person and so on, right? And in the Ramsay case, you're dealing with someone who either was all of those things and an intruder committed this crime, or we're dealing with something very, very, very disturbing. A father, someone who's pretending still to be a father figure and pretending to get justice for his child. And I think made a lot of money with the sale of Access Graphics the following year. And wasn't that the point? Wasn't that the point of the ransom note? So that someone else could be blamed, and so that you could get the maximum value for this particular business. And you wouldn't get that maximum value if you put up your hand and you said, sorry, I made a mistake in this respect and that respect. You'd have this negative publicity. And that is why, isn't that why there's this huge publicity campaign around the Ramsay case? The exact same thing I feel happened in the Chris Watts case, that you literally had the case go to trial, only not to go to trial, and next thing Chris Watts was in jail. But it was necessary for the Chris Watts case to go to trial, if only to determine what Nicole Kessinger's involvement truly was. Because as she received justice, as she received the right treatment for her role, or her role in the Chris Watts case, as someone who was an asset to law enforcement or someone who did whatever to a family. And instead, you seem to have the whole thing with Anadarko. Anadarko was about to be purchased by Occidental. And wasn't the whole thing there all about money? We need this to go ahead. We can't have the negative publicity of the Chris Watts case. And so it's the interest of money over the interests of a community, the interest of money over the interests of justice, the interest of money over the interest of literally everything else. What kind of society do you end up with when you say that? When you say money is more important than everything and everyone else? What kind of society do you end up with? Well, I think you end up with a society where children can be discarded, right? Where the truth can be discarded, where everything can be discarded in the name of treasure. And you then end up with a world that is not really worth anything. You've got a lot of treasure, but you've got a world that is a throwaway world. And it all starts with this little thing where you start covering up something that maybe there's weakness there and you made a mistake, right? But the covering up of it makes that error, it compounds that error 1,000 times, 1,000,000 times. And not only do you, maybe you win your campaign, you weaken the entire America, you weaken, this was an opportunity for Boulder to emerge and finally start prosecuting cases. And that didn't happen. In other words, whatever entrenched corruption was there seemed to just become more entrenched. This was an opportunity to turn a corner. And instead that that behavior simply seemed to get entrenched. Where do you think that maybe you live happily ever after, right? Maybe you go to Hawaii and you have a really good life. But what about the community that you've left behind that now is betrayed and forlorn in a way? What happens there? And I can tell you what the answer is. America 2023. You have people that don't trust law enforcement, and they think that that's a good thing, and I think that's the right thing. People that have less and less faith in the entire justice system, and now the justice system is going to decide on whether someone is going to be president or not, blah, 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 all of that kind of stuff. That's the point that we've reached now. And it starts in Boulder, right? Boulder is just one example of it, but it starts with a case like this. Can you deal with a small, relatively small legal thing in an honest way? Well, if you can't do that, then you're not going to be able to deal with big things in an honest way either. And then what do you end up with? Kind of, you end up with a dishonest system. The entire system is dishonest. And then what is the fate going to be of that dishonest system? In nature, if you have a system that's not working, it just fails. You know, if you've got, let's say, locusts that multiply beyond the rational, beyond what's normal, then they eat up everything that they have, and then there's nothing left. And then next thing, there's nothing. And isn't that happening? Isn't this about greed above good? I don't know if greed is good. A certain amount of incentive, but can you see what I'm getting at? And it all starts with, in that clip that I played, sometimes you've got to tell the whole, hard, cold truth. And once you've done that, then you can heal genuinely and authentically. You can build from there genuinely and authentically. If you don't tell the whole, hard, cold truth and you cover it over, then that's what you learn to do. Lie, not tell the truth, and cover it over. And then you end up with that's the bed that you're going to sleep in. A bed of lies, a bed of covered over things, and a bed that you've made, and you're going to have to sleep in it. And it starts simply with telling the truth. And if you look at the whole of YouTube, not the whole of YouTube, but a lot of YouTube, the true crime community, how often do you feel that you've been told something about a case? It's all about the truth, but you actually told something that probably isn't true after all. Brian Koberg is a serial killer. Rex Uerman's wife participated in this crime. That victim's one of his victims. You told this, but it's probably not true. But we are all participating in this whole thing of lying to ourselves and one another. So it's a very simple solution to this, which is authenticity, but it's not very easy to do. A little bit of self-sacrifice is needed. And the alternative is take what you can and make as much money as you can at the expense of everybody else. You end up with a world that's not worth living in. You end up with a world that's not worth having. And there's a scene in the movie Lord of the Rings where Bilbo says to Sam, I can't keep doing this anymore. Why are we doing this? And then he says, well, you know, we're fighting for our world. And then he says something along the lines of, what are we fighting for? What world are we fighting for? And then I think Sam says something along the lines of that we, how does he say it? You know, I can't quite think of the exact words, but you know what I'm getting at. just want to see if I can find that exact quote because it's so important. Bilbo. He says that there's some good in the world and it's worth fighting for. And so if there's the sense that there's not really any more good in the world, then it's not worth fighting for. Right? If there's good in the world, it's worth fighting for. But if we've allowed the world to become so corrupted, then it isn't worth fighting for. And I can tell you now, I come from South Africa, and although South Africa's got beautiful countryside, beautiful wildlife, the country that I was born in and the country that it is today, it's in other words, it's become so rotten that I personally don't know whether it's worth fighting for. And so in a sense, I'm more interested in fighting for the good in America. And do you want America to end up as dysfunctional as another country that went that same route, where we don't deal properly with our problems? We don't deal honestly with our problems. Where do you think that ends at the end of the day? We prefer money over ethics. We prefer money over altruism. We prefer to make money out of this electricity utility that where we use it as an ATM, and it doesn't matter if millions of people suffer blackouts every day and businesses go. It doesn't matter, because money for me is more important than the welfare of thousands of families and so on. Well, it shouldn't be. And in a society like that, it's doomed. A society like that is doomed. And that's where we're headed. A family like that is also doomed. If a family isn't a good family with good people in it that care about one another, then that family is going to break apart, right? And kind of at the end of the day, this is a question about caring. Do you care? And you might say, 27 years later, the case isn't going to be solved. Who cares about the JONBENET Ramsay case? Steve Thomas did. And if there were more Steve Thomases, I would say that case would have been sorted out in 1999, 2000. If Alex Hunter cared about this case as much as Steve Thomas did, and in the same sincere way, in the same passionate way, then I think the case would have been totally, totally different. So anyway, I'm going to end there. Well, I've gone way longer than I thought I would. Sorry for the bit of a downer Christmas message, but yeah. I think you've also got to be authentic about what's really happening, and then once you've been authentic, you can say, okay, well, let's enjoy the rest of the evening, instead of just pretending that, like right now in December 2023, we're living in a happy world and we can just jump into a fairy tale until we get awoken again and again and again out of it. Thanks a lot, Cheryl Locke. Do you guys want to see Timmy? Timmy, come. Hey, we need some levity here. Timmy, come. So in tomorrow's live stream, it's going to be totally different. I'm going to just show you footage of the Christmas star that you see over there. I actually walked right up to it, and I'm going to tell you a little bit about that. And so that should be quite interesting. Timmy, come. Okay, so Timmy is a happy doggy because he got a couple of bones with some meat on it during the Christmas lunch. So he's quite a happy dog. He's also quite a sleepy dog. Hey, Timmy, a sleepy dog. Good. You're having a good Christmas, Timmy. Okay. I'm going to just end off by looking at a couple of messages. I still didn't get your thoughts, Thought Criminal, on what you think the motive is in this case. If you want to read what I think is my best book on this case, read Christmas Star. It's got a lot to do with the last photo, right? So check out Christmas Star. Gene P says, thanks, Nick. It's not a downer when we are remembering. Okay. Wolf Woman, thanks for that comment. Timmy, can you not stay awake? Can you not stay awake? Now, the funny thing, when I scratch his chest, when I know he's really enjoying it, then he yawns like repeatedly. So I know I've hit the spot when, can you see he's trying not to yawn? Anyway. Thanks a lot, guys, for joining me. Just have a look at some last comments. Thanks a lot, Cancella. Merry Christmas from South Carolina. I was in South Carolina as recently as the end of November, about a month ago. I was in Myrtle Beach. I'm hoping to go back there at some point. Thanks a lot, Barbara. I appreciate your work and thoughts. Thank you. I saw a pic from JONBENET's 6th birthday on Pinterest. Okay. Thanks, mods, for being here. I'm a little bit sorry that Lisa wasn't here. But Chelsea, thanks very much for being here. Also, thanks so much for that Schnauzer Merry Christmas thing. Thanks a lot for the effort that you put into that. We're hoping that Jean is going to take some photos of frost and the conditions literally at ground level tomorrow. I'll share those with you. Tomorrow's live will be just very short, just taking you through some photos of the Christmas star in Boulder. Wow, Merry Christmas from Madrid. What are you doing in Madrid, Wendy? Terry Dean, also thanks a lot for moderating here. Thanks, guys, for keeping it clean. I didn't really see any questionable remarks. Katie Kane says, I got my Molly a heated throw for the porch. She's got no undercoat but loves to be out on the love seat. Okay. Robbie Robin says, I have Christmas Star. What do you think of Christmas Star, Robbie Robin? What do you remember from it? Not there yet. Resentment towards family is my thought. Okay, last couple of comments. Silent Moment says, I agree the truth itself is never really a bummer. Oh, that's a good point. Dang it, Nancy, I love that. Happy holidays from Texas. Yeah, it's quite, it's nice that I can say I've been to Texas. I really liked Austin. I really liked the Deep Eddy Pool. I'd love to swim in it at some point. Robbie Robin says, it's very good. I also listened to the audiobook. Red Raven Spirits says, Merry Christmas from Queensland. Ashby or Ash81 says, you have a lot of South Carolina fans. Good to see you. Good to see you. Amy, Merry Christmas from California. I was actually wearing a Huntington Beach shirt to Christmas lunch. Robbie Robbins says the last photo is interesting. John is married to a someone involved in fashion. Not just fashion design or just clothing. That I think she works in Vegas, or she has a business that's related to Vegas. Julie was up from Long Beach, California. Big mudsling. I'm not quite sure what you're saying there, but there you go. Did Timmy go? Timmy went to lunch as well. In fact, Timmy was the reason we had to sit outside because dogs weren't allowed inside. I'd actually phoned them to say, I've got a schnauzer, can I bring him along? And they said, sure. But I think they misunderstood because there's also a bit of an accommodation aspect to that spot. So, oh, is it freezing there? It's nice and warm here. Definitely is. I've burned 2 pizzas in a row, so I'm really hungry. And it's definitely not good good protocol researching and getting your live ready and putting a pizza in the oven, because you must not concentrate too much, otherwise you're gonna, anyway. So I've burned 2 pizzas in a row. Does Timmy like beer? I don't know. It does quite like coffee. Wow, you up late. Merry Christmas from the Lower East Side, New York City. Okay. Anyway, I hope you guys are keeping warm. I hope you've had a good celebration, and if not, maybe one's waiting in your near future. Timmy doesn't like burnt pizza, and I wouldn't give it to him anyway, but there it is. Someone says, have you had Christmas Day? It's nearly 3 a.m. here in Northern England. Well, it's Christmas Day has just started. Yeah, it's 5 to 5 on Christmas morning. So it would have been 27 years ago today that Burke and JONBENET got up early. What is quite interesting is that I think Burke and JONBENET slept in the same room because they seem to get up at the same time. I don't know that for a fact, but I kind of get the idea that they woke up at the same time to check on their, to celebrate Christmas. Robin Dawn says, I'm confused about the last photo. Yeah, this is the last photo of JONBENET. And she wasn't found certainly not in that black thing, but that kind of black jacket. But she was wearing this white sweater with a sequin star on it. She was wearing that. Stephanie, good to see you. Sharon says, I'm going to 2 Christmas dinners tomorrow. Wow. One at noon and one at 6 p.m. I hope you don't eat too much dessert. I know I often come out of the Christmas period having put on a lot of weight. So, and that's not a very fun way to start the new year. Was a second tie in JONBENET's hair when found? Can't quite remember. There's a drawing of it. There's a drawing of it. Okay, Timmy, I'm going to put you down. The very last thing I wanted to mention is from this National Enquirer dated April 2001, so 2 years after the grand jury. It says Ramsay's changed their story about murder night. The part that I want to read out here is just this. Even though it's almost inconceivable that John and Patsy wouldn't talk to Burke about what happened, they say they didn't find out Burke was awake the morning of the tragedy until he testified before a grand jury nearly 2.5 years later. Let me say that again. Even though it's almost inconceivable that John and Patsy wouldn't talk to Burke about what happened, they say they didn't find out. According to this interview, they say they didn't find out about that Burke was awake until Burke testified before a grand jury. In other words, Burke was saying, I was awake. Anyway, this is definitely quite an interesting article. Anyway, that is it from me. I want to thank you guys for your super chats. Bear in mind, you can gift memberships as well. And also bear in mind, I'll be back tomorrow for the third and last. There'll be a short anniversary special dealing with the Christmas star and the significance of it. I hope you guys are having a wonderful Christmas. I'm really happy to see Stephanie here. Stephanie, I don't know if you listened to my messages, but definitely was a curious sequence of events. Yeah, thanks a lot. Thanks a lot, LB. Mudslinger says, just dropping in on lives, and what great live and cause. Thanks a lot. Alias Grape says, thanks so much. Great stream. Bye, everybody. Oh, okay. Thanks, Stephanie. I will check it out. Thanks. Jalsi, again, thanks for being totally on your feet, on your toes. Thanks a lot for being here. I hope you're doing well. I hope your son's doing okay. Lisa Breck, again, thanks so much for that super chat. And I hope you guys are going to have a fantastic day. And if it's a miserable Christmas, well, you're not alone. There's some people who are not having Christmas at all. Funny enough, I walked my dog with an attractive young lady, and she's a very strong Christian, but she's such a strong Christian that she doesn't believe in Christmas. She feels like it's besides the point of Christmas. And so when I said goodbye to her, I said, "Oh, you must have a Merry Christmas." She was like, "No, I don't believe in Christmas," even though she's a really strong Christian. And so I guess she's going to have a miserable Christmas in terms of the Christmas thing. But then I said to her, well, then I hope you have a happy time with your family. So if that applies to you, or if you've got a pet around you, well, I hope you have a good experience, whatever you're doing. And you don't have to be happy. You're allowed to just, it's another day, and then there's another year waiting for us. And we've got some work to do. There's injustice in the world, and is the momentum increasing or decreasing? It's part of the job of this channel to address that and hopefully take us in the right direction. So hopefully we will. Terry Dean, also, thanks a lot for being here, guys. And so I think that's it from me. I'm going to try and end this off better than I did last time. See if I can get it right. It's not absolutely seamless, but anyway, it's what I can do. Okay, guys, all the best. See you guys next time. See you guys tomorrow, around about this time tomorrow.